Hey everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for another installment of the YUNOREVIEW, where I give you my thoughts and opinions on a bunch of records I wasn't able to formally review on the channel. So I talk about them gauntlet style in one miniature review and take after another. That's what it is. You may have caught one of these videos before, so you know what the formula that I'm going to be approaching you with is here. So let's go and do what I said that I would do. Ba-bam! Australia's own Amyl and the Sniffers record over here, Comfort to Me. It is not a bad mix of post-punk, punk rock, and pub rock. It's got energy, it's got attitude, it's nasty as well. Some of the performances on this thing are a little middle of the road, and I thought some of the songwriting and riffs were maybe a bit too basic. The band isn't exactly bringing a brand new, exciting flair to the sound or style. But still, there's no denying that what the band is doing here is done well, and they put a hell of a lot of heart into it. So while this record might be a bit bland at points, it's still pretty rowdy. New record from 99 Neighbors. I was hoping this one would blow me away considering how much talk I've heard of them over the past few years. Listening to their music, I get a lot of Brockhampton vibes, Frank Ocean vibes, a splash of Odd Future generally. Through this project, we get a lot of sensitive boy raps and alternative R&B. It's well assembled and produced, but it's super derivative as well. While the production and performances on this record are fine, the band is yet to push it far enough to where they've hit upon a distinct sound or even, I don't know, like pen a banger that transcends their very obvious influences. But, you know, maybe that'll happen on the next one. I guess we'll see. I'm sorry, guys. I'm not seeing the hype behind this one. Just really badly produced and performed bedroom jazz with weak vocals. The songs aren't great, the performances aren't great, the jazz touches aren't exactly exciting for anybody, I think, who's really truly into jazz. And on top of it, the sort of alt production is just very unflattering and boring. Brand new record from this Toronto rapper. I was hoping to see bounce back after a kind of convoluted album concept the last time around, but I think this one brings its own collection of issues, honestly. As I was listening to this, I just got the sense that it was repeatedly trying to convince me of how clever and relatable it was, and through that process just ended up coming across less clever and less relatable. There are points where even it feels a bit preachy, even though I agree with much of the politics that Shad is spitting on this record. Like the song Work, for example. I can't think of a better example of a song where I really fuck with what you're saying here. I align with 110% of the message. But on top of that, this is one of the most annoying tracks I've heard this year. Production is grating. Vocals are just really whiny. Yeah, unfortunately, I think even though Shad put, I think, some bigger and wilder energy in this project, it only ended up resulting in a record that was less listenable. Out of the ashes of I Wrestled a Bear Once now comes Spiritbox with their debut full-length record, and it's pretty much a combination of some of what you've known, you know, from these musicians before. We have bits of metalcore in the mix, but now we've got some gent-style guitars and soaring alt-metal choruses a la Evanescence. So undeniably, Spiritbox is bringing a pretty accessible and versatile sound. But the way they're combined is just about the only interesting thing about Spiritbox, in my opinion, because it's not like the characteristics of the genres respectively going into this record are pulled off all that uniquely. The metalcore passages are pretty generic, the gent-style guitars are dime a dozen at this point, and while the cleanly sung vocals and alt-metal choruses are fine, I don't really come away from most of them like with anything stuck in my head. So yeah, that's ultimately the thing for me with this record. It's versatile, but kind of unimaginative. New G-Eazy album. Blah. Yeah, Metallica covers album project. It's huge. It's gigantic. It's sort of a mess. There are some truly awful covers on this thing, and there are some great ones as well. I mean, I think this is, in a way, almost the future of big covers projects like this, because in a way I think it's kind of sensible to maybe be like, hey, you know what, let's have multiple artists cover the same song over and over and over, and you know, the fans can just decide which ones it is that they mess with and they don't, and they'll just like kind of save and go back to and stream the tracks they really care for. Like, this would be absolutely annoying and horrible to listen to just as a physical release, because I don't know if I want to hear like a million covers of Enter Sandman from a bunch of different artists that I like. But you know what, the moments that do stand out are great, and you know, I really do appreciate that Metallica went the extra mile to get mainstream artists on this thing, to get underground artists on this thing, to invite even very unorthodox approaches and covers of these songs. Even though it is a mess and it is definitely far from being enjoyable from beginning to end, I do admire how much risks they took putting this covers project together, and it's a hell of a way to celebrate a classic and amazing metal album. New LP from Meek Mill, and there are some decent highlights on it, some great introspective moments like the title track, some bangers as well, but overall it's really a mixed bag. It's a bloated record, a ton of features, hit or miss instrumentals. The song freaking On My Soul is easily one of Meek's worst ever. It's just too scattershot to be lovable from beginning to end, but Meek is still very much undeniably a talented rapper with a one-of-a-kind voice, flow, and delivery style. I just wish he would kind of, you know, reduce that down into a project that is just higher quality from track to track and more consistent. Australia's Pond, now on their 9th record, titled 9, and this album coincides with a really big stylistic change of pace as the band is suddenly veering into an alternative dance direction on this LP, pulling some big cues from Primal Scream, LCD Sound System, a host of other artists as well. They do kind of have their own approach to the whole thing, and some tracks on this record end up very fun and groovy and chaotic, very, very danceable. There are some duds though, and as much as I appreciate the band trying their hand at this style of music that I very much have, you know, a bit of an affinity for, I wouldn't exactly say I came away from this feeling like they put their own super unique spin on it. More or less they kind of attained a vibe that's already been achieved by other very successful artists and kind of toyed with it for a bit. But I don't know, if they tried this sort of thing again and were able to do it a bit more uniquely, I'd love to hear another LP of this. The new Full of Hell record, which I think brings some impressive versatility to the table. The death and grind tracks are absolutely insane and just blistering. It is a brutal 21-minute slew of tracks. There are also a few noise cuts in the mix as well, but you know, not a lot of it was really sticking with me. The more metal-oriented tracks are kind of a blur. The noise tracks are abrasive, but texturally and sonically, kind of whatever. Yeah, there's certainly a lot of aggression and abrasiveness showcased on this record, but not a whole lot that was really drawing me back to it. I really respect Adia Victoria's mission on this record, and generally to kind of expand blues and blues rock to a newer audience with maybe like some darker and more dramatic and edgier sounds. Overall, I see this as a record with great intentions, a good heart, and even better politics. And even though I think the blues roots of these songs are embodied pretty well, overall I thought a lot of the songwriting and performances just lack bite. If we're going to continue to push forward in this direction, like, there needs to be more fire and more intensity to just about everything. And some of the darker and more psychedelic touches instrumentally on a few of the tracks here are certainly a start, but this LP just does not go far enough. Latest record from John Darnielle's Mountain Goats here. It took me a while to really get into it, and I'm glad I eventually did. It is certainly better than the very disappointing In League with Dragons, and certainly more inspired than the kind of bland Getting Into Knives, but it still does bring its own issues. There are some middle-of-the-road and very underwhelming vocal performances and writing on songs here and there, but really, in my opinion, the biggest and most glaring flaw of this record is that John has decided to sort of embrace elements of jazz and jazz fusion on this record, and a lot of those flourishes and embellishments don't go over all that well. In fact, I hope he doesn't try to force jazz into the equation on a record ever again, because it just makes the backing instrumentation sound really awkward. That being said, there are moments of very fiery writing and vocal performances, like the Destruction of the Koala, Hydra Collection as well, I thought was a major highlight, but yeah, a lot of the jazz instrumentation here just came off very amateur and unflattering. Latest LP from the noise pop duo known as Sleigh Bells. Certainly this record has its merits, some standout singles, and I like that they're a bit more creative in their clashes of pop and noise and rock and metal and punk and even a touch of industrial here and there. But overall, the presentation of these tracks isn't nearly as polished as they were on Jessica Rabbit, their last record, and even that album in a lot of respects was still kind of a mess. I still think at this point Sleigh Bells is in a better spot creatively than they were in the first leg of their career, but I'm still coming away from these records wanting a lot more. Zishin, have you given any of these albums a listen? Did you love them? Did you hate them? Why? What do you think I should review next? And yeah, over here next to my head, it's another video you can check out. Hit that Upworthy link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, YUNOREVIEW, music, 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 YouTube, camera, bald, forever.